So I have 10-15 minutes to tell you a little bit about green bonds, and I am going to assume that people don't know much about them. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit what bonds are, even though people may know what bonds are. But as you know, bonds are a financial instrument to get some money out there. So corporates, sovereigns issue bonds in the market, and then investors buy those bonds, and then the issuers repay the money and they pay interest on those bonds. And green bonds are regular bonds. So the beauty of them is they're exactly the same as any regular bond, but the main difference is that the proceeds from the bond are going to be used with green projects. So same financial terms, same risk, same price as a regular bond, but there is defined eligibility criteria for the projects where the bond proceeds are going to go. There's pre-established project selection, so the bond issuer will need to tell in advance where the proceeds are going to be used, and they're going to say, we're going to use it for renewable energy, we're going to use it for forestry projects, we're going to use it for energy efficiency projects, for green buildings. And then what the bond issuer will need to do is ring-fence those proceeds. So they will need to have an internal system to make sure that the money goes to the green projects. And then the bond issuer will need to report. So they will need to go back to bond holders and tell them what we actually did, what we were supposed to do with the proceeds. Is the green bond market regulated? No, it isn't. There's no legal definition of what a green bond is. What we have are the green bond principles that are voluntary principles that have actually been defined by stakeholders. They have been defined by issuers, by banks, by underwriters. So in a way, the market of green bonds have self-regulated itself to avoid greenwashing. So these principles are what give investors confidence that it is indeed a green bond. There are a couple of countries that have issued legal requirements for green bonds, and one of the countries is China in its way, when they have approved the green finance guidelines for China, and the other country is India. And there's a number of developing countries that are working on defining green bonds at this very moment. I believe Mexico is working on it and Nigeria is working on it. So what do the green bond principles establish? They establish what criteria have to be to select eligible green projects. They establish that the green bonds, the projects themselves, should be validated with what is known as a second opinion. So usually the issuer would go to either a university or to another third independent entity to get the process validated before the issuance. So the issuer would say, this is how we defined our green projects, this is how we have ring-fenced our distribution and allocation of the proceeds. Do you think our bond is going to be green? And they will get this second opinion saying, yes, the bond is indeed green. And then they will issue and say, we have the second opinion from X or Y or Z. Sometimes there will be an external and independent verification post-issuance by more of an auditor type of third party that will look back and say, okay, actually this did happen. We can now verify that the proceeds have been used in accordance with the criteria that were selected beforehand. And then the last principle we have mentioned is there has to be reporting on the projects or the assets that have been benefited from the green bond proceeds. The market growth has been explosive. So the first issuance took place in 2007. EIB was the first issuer, and we had in one of our panels during LJD the creator of that first green bond. The other MDBs started issuing, and then in 2013, corporates started issuing. And this year, we have had corporations like Apple or Starbucks issue their first green bonds, and Apple's green bond was worth $1.5 billion. So the market has grown from 2007, and we are now looking at 76 billion. So this chart is actually outdated. $76 billion worth of green bonds this year so far. But it's really a drop in a bucket, because the bond market is worth 100 billion. So even if this year we go up to 100 million, we have a lot of room to grow. What is green? We have mentioned second opinions. We have mentioned the voluntary principles that recommend external review. There's some standards which we could say are more like an eco-label, so that they would, if you follow the standard to the letter, then your bond could be a climate bond standard bond. And there's a number of stock exchanges that are also requiring that green bonds listed with them comply with certain rules. The first one was the Oslo Stock Exchange, but now the London Stock Exchange also has certain requirements. Mexico also has certain requirements. So stock exchanges are also pushing the envelope. And there's a couple of indices that are coming up with their green bond index as well. So where do we see the market evolving? From IFC, which, as you may know, is the private sector arm of the World Bank. Our job has been to issue green bonds. We started issuing in 2008. Now we are moving towards helping our clients, which are private sector clients in developing countries, to issue their own green bonds and try to do technical assistance and increase their capacity to be able to issue green bonds in their local markets. We have issued and helped local issuers issuing local currency. And one way that we have tried also to mobilize the green bond market is by investing in local green bonds in local markets. And I think that on Monday this week, the first bond issued by a local Colombian bank was listed in the Colombian Stock Exchange, and we were the anchor investor in that bond. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm very happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Do you think that excluding green bonds from internal control systems like the COSO or the Dodd-Frank control systems, you think it's assuring to investors? Because ordinarily speaking, stocks, where you have proper reporting, following the Dodd-Frank prescriptions and the internal framework controls, it is more assuring for investors. But with your green bond system, you seem to take it out from the normal stream of investments in stock exchange and things like that. You think it's assuring self-regulation?
Yeah.
You think it's assuring for investors?
So let me clarify, maybe I wasn't clear enough, and I'm sorry for that. You follow exactly the same process you would follow with a regular bond, and you add the green on top. So you would list it and comply with absolutely every regulation. You're going to have to issue a prospectus, you're going to have to comply with the listing requirements, but on top of that, you're going to have to comply with the green bond principles, or you can follow the climate bond standards. So it's in addition. And that's the main reason why we're trying to work with corporations in emerging markets, because for a corporation, it's an added cost to issuing a bond. And many would say, is it really worth it, given that the price is the same, for us to go the extra mile, to have to get all these obligations on ourselves, which will include to have another internal reporting control and another. So that's how we're trying to help issuers in local markets, to tell them it is worth it, because even what we have found, even if the pricing is the same, you are going to be able to tap a different investor base. So by issuing a green bond, you may have some investors that are interested in social responsibility that will buy your bond that would not have bought your regular bond.
Do we have any more questions? Yeah, here in the back. Beth.
Hi, I was just wondering if you have thoughts on scaling up green bonds. You had mentioned the big gap and the big opportunity. What are your thoughts there?
I think that green bonds are just, right now, the way we have seen the growth, it's really not enough. And I think that's only one of the elements we need to be able to unlock the potential of capital markets. There's a number of initiatives that MDBs are working on. There's talks about creating funds that would invest in green bonds, so at least you would have a fund investing in green bonds all over the world so you can scale up. I agree, I think green bonds are not enough. I think that what green bonds show is that there is an appetite to invest in something green, and that appetite is no longer only pushed by MDBs, but also standard corporates are willing to go the extra mile. I think that the main thing that green bonds have proven in these few years is the need for transparency. And I think that what's really, really important about green bonds is the focus on reporting, because that reporting is gonna make you calculate your greenhouse gas emissions, and that transparency can then push some other innovations. To the extent we don't know, or private sector is not disclosing climate risk or carbon intensity of assets, it's going to be very difficult to push the envelope, to mobilize more capital.
Great, thank you very much. Any more questions in the audience? Otherwise, I have one quick question for you. So looking ahead, what are your expectations from the green bond market? And we've seen quite an exceptional growth within it. So do you think that that kind of exponential growth will continue?
Thank you. I think it will. I think that what will probably happen also is that there is a conversation has recently started on social bonds. And I think that hopefully we will move into social bonds that will be an umbrella. Green bonds will be one of of the bonds under the social bonds umbrella, but we will see more ESG kind of dialogue coming into the capital markets.
Okay, and finally, is your eventual hope and your ambition to basically make all investments grounded on sustainability principles, grounded on green and social guidelines?
Absolutely. I think, but it's easy for me to answer that question because I work for an institution that has sustainability as part of our mandate. So I think that's where we should move, absolutely.
Great. And with that, Flavia, I'm going to thank you very much. So you've heard it from Flavia. We've got a growing green bond market, and it's an exciting time to be part of that. The financial landscape is really shifting towards environmental and social inclusion. Thank you so very much for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for having me.